going on, everybody? How's everybody doing? Good to see you guys. Blue states, red states, and the Electoral College. Let's get to it. All right, so there's this article here. The blue state exodus accelerates. So here you have, it says Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker shrugged last year after several high-profile corporations left his state. Countless companies are choosing Illinois as their home, Mr. Pritzker said. Then why does a new Internal Revenue Service report show an accelerating taxpayer exodus from Illinois and other high-tax states? The IRS each spring publishes data on the movement of adjusted gross income, AGI, and taxpayers across state lines from year to year. Some Democratic governors, such as Mr. Pritzker, claimed that the 2020 census undercounted their state populations. But the IRS data shows blue states are losing taxpayers and income at an increasing clip. The IRS data shows a net 105,000 people left Illinois in 2021, taking with them some $10.9 billion in AGI. That's up from, not down, but that's up from $8.5 billion in 2020 and $6 billion in 2019. New York's income loss increased $24.5 billion in 2021 from $19.5 billion in 2020 and $9 billion in 2019. It jumped from $9 billion of a loss in New York in 2019 and 1 year later to 19 billion. Jesus. California lost $29.1 billion in 2021, more than triple what it lost in 2019, more than triple what it did in 2019. Jesus. By contrast, the lowest tax states added some $100 billion of income during the pandemic. Zero income tax Florida gained $39.2 billion, up, not down, up from $23.7 billion in 2020 and $17.7 billion in 2019. About $9.8 billion of the total arrived from New York. So New York, individuals from New York are moving down to Florida, and with them, they brought $9.8 billion of revenue. $3.9 billion from Illinois came to Florida from Illinois, $3.9 billion. And $3.7 billion from New Jersey came to Florida, and $3.5 billion from California came to Florida. It says here, Texas was another winner. Florida, Texas was another winner, attracting a net $10.9 billion in 2021, which follows a gain of $6.3 billion in 2020 and $4 billion in 2019. Californians represented more than half of Texas's income gain in 2021. The Golden State, California, also sent $4.4 billion to Nevada, $2.7 billion to Arizona, and $2 billion to Washington. Nevada and Washington don't tax wages, and Arizona is phasing out its income tax. Illinois' loss came to all of its neighboring states, but the biggest beneficiaries of its taxpayer flight was Florida, Texas, Indiana, and Wisconsin. Mr. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, can't blame lousy weather since it's not exactly balmy in Kenosha. Billionaire Ken Griffin cited Chicago's out-of-control crime last year as the reason he moved his hedge fund to Miami. Not defund the police. He moved out of Chicago, moved to Miami. You guys know I'm from Miami. I was born in Miami, born in Florida, born in Miami. So all of the defund the police, all of that type of stuff, all of not looking out for the police department. If you guys know me, you guys see I'm always posting my police department. I'm a champion for the police, and there's many, many reasons why, right? Come to Miami. We take care of our police department. We love law enforcement. We love hometown heroes. We love our first responders in Miami. Come down to Miami if you feel like your state is not treating you correctly. In Florida, raising taxes to pay for underfunded public worker pensions and bloated social programs doesn't help the land of Lincoln attract talent. The same is true for other blue states. New York Democrats in April 2021 increased the combined state and local top income tax rate from 14.8% to 12.7%. It would have been a surprise if taxpayer flight hadn't increased that year. A major problem for high tax states is that their escapees often pay more in taxes than their newcomers. The IRS data shows that taxpayers leaving Illinois and New York typically made about 30 to 40,000 more than those who are arriving. So people that are moving into the states, the newer people that might be moving into New York, they don't make as much as the people that have been there and established there in New York for many, many years and decades. So it's a bigger bang for their buck when the people leave. Much more is going out of New York down to Florida, down to Miami, than going into New York from other places. Of Illinois's total out migration, 28% of the leavers made between $100,000 to $200,000, and 23% made $200,000 or more. By contrast, the average return of a Florida newcomer in 2021 was about $150,000, more than double that of taxpayers who left. So people coming into Florida are coming in with money more than double of people leaving Florida. So Florida's still winning in the end. High earners spend more, which yields higher sales tax revenue. This helped Florida post a record more than ever before, breaking records. 22.22 billion budget surplus last year. California is forecasting a $29.5 billion deficit. So Florida is going 22 billion surplus. California is going 29.5 billion deficit. All this income migration helps explain why Florida and other low tax states led the country in job growth. Employment grew 4.5% in Florida and 4.3% in Texas over the past year, compared to 2.5% in California and 2.2% in Illinois. In March, the unemployment rate was 5.4% in New York City, metro region, 5% in Los Angeles, 4.5% in Chicago, versus 5.4% in New York, metro region, 5% in Los Angeles, 4.5% in Chicago unemployment rate, 1.9% in Miami. Listen, people, and sorry, Mr. Prisker, but the data is clear that Illinois and other states dominated by progressives are losing human talent in droves to better governed states. That's an opinion. That last part's an opinion piece, opinion statement. But facts and numbers don't lie, you guys. This is the issue. And you guys know I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican. I've always been NPA since the moment I could vote. No party affiliation. This is the issue. What people need to really understand is that when things occur and when things change in major ways, it happens over years and years and years and years. It doesn't just happen overnight. Like, for example, when you're talking about like World War II, things just don't pop off. Things gather. There's a battle here. There's an invasion here one year. And then 10 years later, there's another invasion over here. And things just like, it's like a little, something small happens here. Something small happens here 5 years later. Something small happens here 15 years later. And then one day it just explodes, you guys. And you're like, oh, how did we get here? All these little things that happen over decades is what got us here. Let me talk to my people in the blue states. Let me talk to my governments in the blue states. You guys need to tighten up because what's going to happen is I'm going to let you guys know right now, all my people in the blue states, all my progressives. I love you all. Listen up. I love my conservatives too, but listen up to my progressives. What's going to happen is that you guys are going to wake up one day and one day the electoral college is going to change because of population. Because people are going to be leaving your states more and more if you guys don't tighten up, blue states. And so, for example, right now, and in my entire lifetime, when the presidential election happens, when the presidential election occurs, all these states start coming in red states, all the small states, Iowa and Nebraska and Oklahoma and this and that. Even sometimes when Florida comes in with its electoral states, when Florida comes in with its electoral numbers, right? It's electoral college numbers. When Florida comes in, I always remember growing up that people who were Democrats and progressives, they always were like, well, you know what? California has 42, so we don't care about all those little states, Iowa, Nebraska, and Oklahoma, and South Dakota, and North Dakota, all turning red because California comes in at such a big number because of its population that it kind of wipes all those little red states out of the way when California comes in with its electoral college numbers. And it always was something, it was like amazing for me to always see on election night because California being on the West Coast, its number comes in later, right? Than the East Coast. So it's like you'll see like Florida and all this, and it will seem like the Republican will be winning the presidency because all these red states start to come in, but then you'll see New York hit, and New York's highly populated, and that kind of like takes some of the steam away from the Republican nominee for the presidency. And then in your mind, you always know, all right, well, you always have California that's going to come in later because it's on the West Coast, so its numbers are counted later. But you always knew, Democrats and progressives, you always had that big blue state of California come in with a whole bunch of electoral college votes. That's going to wipe out more than the majority of the Republican electoral college votes because California comes in with such a high electoral college number. And that's based on population. This is the first sign. Don't be surprised if if governments running blue states, if you all don't tighten up on your tax structure, become more business friendly, and respect your law enforcement, and respect your first responders, and respect your hometown heroes. And if people continue to leave blue states, this blue state exodus, it's going to be a news story in 10, 15, 20 years that comes across the news, and nobody's going to really notice it. And nobody's going to really pay attention to it because nobody watches the news these days. Everybody's, invested in social media and seeing all that type of stuff. So nobody's going to care about it. But it's going to be a little news story. It might come across the bottom ticker, and it's going to say California electoral college votes downgraded to, and it's going to show a lower number than what California's electoral college votes have now. And it's going to start saying things like Florida's electoral college votes increased to, Texas electoral college votes increased to. And you'll start to see in red states, their electoral college votes is going to start to increase. And in traditionally blue states, their electoral college votes is going to start to decrease, go down. And so when election nights comes in 15, 20 years, 25 years, when those election night results come in, Democrats and progressives aren't going to be able to depend on the states that were highly populated, that were democratically ran, and that were traditionally Democrat, that Democratic and progressives, Democratic voters and progressives can always depend on those traditionally blue states. Those numbers are going to change. And this exodus is the first sign of what will come in the future if governments in blue states, progressive Democratic governments, do not straighten up, tighten up, and change their policies. I'm telling you now, this is a warning for all Democrats and progressives. Straighten up, tighten up, or things will change and it will hit you like a ton of bricks, or you know it, and it will be too late to do anything about it. Love you guys. You guys take care. I'll see you all later. All right. Love y'all. Take care. Peace.